Shalom, shalom. This is Elder Isaac Hill, Restores the Truth Ministries, sharing with you another scripture nugget. This particular week, we're going to share a scripture nugget based on Ezekiel chapter 34. And I like to call this Yahweh, your shepherd, by proxy. Yahweh, your shepherd, by proxy. In Ezekiel 34, verse 11 and verse 12 rather, it says, "For thus saith the Master Yahweh, see, I myself shall search for my sheep and seek them out, as a shepherd seeks out his flock on the day he is among his scattered sheep. So I shall seek out my sheep and deliver them from all the places where they were scattered in a day of cloud and thick darkness." Now my question is, why would Yahweh decide that he himself will become a shepherd and seek after his own flock? There was already rulers in place, Torah teachers in place. There was already kings in place. So why would Yahweh decide that instead of you, I myself will decide, or I myself will go and restore my sheep? Well, to find that, we look at verse 2 of Ezekiel 34. "Son of man, prophesy against the shepherds of Israel. Prophesy and say to them, Thus saith the Master Yahweh to the shepherds, Woe to the shepherds of Israel, who have been feeding themselves. Should not the shepherd feed the flock?" So he brings an accusation against the rulers or the leaders of Israel. Their focus was on themselves. Similar like today when, as leaders, as people that are in ministry, if you will, sometimes we focus on ourselves and sometimes we focus on building our name, building our branding, um, building the ministry, building the congregation, and less about the sheep, focusing on us instead of the sheep. And so the word here for shepherd in Hebrew is ro'ah, which means ruler or teacher. And we find that what was happening in Israel is that they focused more on themselves and less upon the sheep. Look what he says in verse 3. He says, "You eat the fat, and you put on the wool. You slaughter the fatlings. You do not feed the flock." Now, what is he saying here? Fat represents the choicest part of the meat. And sometimes you find ministries or leaders, sometimes if we're not careful, we'll find ourselves, we want the choicest part. We want the best part. We want the best part. So that's what the fat represents. But then he also says you slaughter the fatlings. In other words, I want the best of the flock. I want the best of the flock. Not only do I want the best of the flock, but then when I get the best of the flock, I want the best meat of the flock after it has been slaughtered. And so sometimes we have to check our mentality, our emotions, our purpose. As we said on last week about aspiration, sometimes we have to check our aspiration. What is it that's motivating us to do the things that we do? Now look at verse 4. Look what he says. He says, "Now, you have not strengthened the weak, nor have you healed the sick, nor bound up the broken, nor brought back the stray, nor sought what was lost, but you have ruled." Look how they rule, with might and harshness. And sometimes, as leaders, we have to be careful that we are not coming across so stern and so demanding upon the sheep that we cause the sheep to scatter. But also in this particular verse, we find that actually Yahweh is giving 5 points that a leader or a shepherd should actually walk in or should actually be found doing. First of all, we should be strengthening the weak. Secondly, we should be healing the sick. Thirdly, we should be bandaging the broken or the crippled. Fourthly, restoring the sheep and seeking for the lost sheep. Now, as a shepherd, one of the things uh, that many people perhaps have not focused on is that if you are a shepherd of sheep, eventually, because you are tending to the flock, eventually you begin to smell like sheep yourself. Why? Because you are doing these things in order to strengthen the weak, in order to heal the sick, in order to bandage, in order to restore, in order to seek for the lost sheep. You have to be among the sheep. You have to be walking right along with the sheep. You have to touch the sheep. You have to feel the sheep. You can't bandage a sheep if you're not actually touching and feeling the sheep. So how is Yahweh going to do this? Leading or becoming a shepherd and restoring the sheep himself? He's going to do it by proxy. And what do I mean by proxy? He's going to do it through a vessel that have yielded themselves to him. So the first proxy we find is that in the book of Deuteronomy chapter 18 verse 15, Moshe says, Yahweh, your Elohim, shall raise up for you a prophet like me from the midst from your brothers. So when we see this particular word prophet, like, or rather the phrase like unto me, a prophet, we see that the proxy has to be a Torah giver because Moses was the Torah giver. The second thing we see about this proxy is found over back in Ezekiel 34, verse 24, I believe, where it says, and I, Yahweh, shall be their Elohim, and my servant David, a prince in the midst. I, Yahweh, have spoken. And when we see the word David or the name David throughout the text, David was a ruler. David was a king. So therefore, this particular proxy has to be someone as Moshe, a Torah giver, and as David, and through the lineage of David, he has to be a ruler. In 2 Corinthians chapter 5, verse 19, we find Shaul speaking here, and he says this. It was that Elohim was in Messiah doing what? Restoring the world to favor unto himself. So by proxy, he's using Yeshua, the Messiah, to restore or to bring back the lost sheep. So that's how Yahweh is, as our shepherd, leading us by proxy. He was in Messiah, in Yeshua, restoring us back to him. And as leaders, that's what we should do. Strengthen the weak, heal the sick, bandage the broken, restore the sheep, and seek for the lost sheep. Not branding, not building our ministry, but actually operating in ministry. When you operate in ministry, that's what you're doing, those 5 things. Shalom, shalom. See you next time on Scripture Nuggets.